So yesterday in Washington at the United Nations, the High Commissioner for Refugees has denied that there's any need for reform after the Home Secretary said that being gay or a woman just is not enough to be able to claim asylum.
Well, in a speech in Washington, D.C., Suella Braverman said uncontrolled and illegal migration had put an unsustainable pressure on the UK's asylum system and the British taxpayer.
Where individuals are being persecuted, it is right that we offer sanctuary. But we will not be able to sustain an asylum system if, in effect, simply being gay or a woman or fearful of discrimination in your country of origin is sufficient to qualify for protection.
OK, so she's had her say, but is she right? Does the United Nations Convention that was drafted, as we have pointed out yesterday, 70 years ago, to protect refugees, mostly from the Second World War, need tightening?
Well, let's speak to the former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib, who joins us in the studio. Good morning to you,
Good morning.
Ben. Look, we're used to Suella Braverman being edgy. This was controversial. I mean, things like saying multiculturalism has failed and that mass migration is a threat to the West. Do you agree with her?
Well, I do agree with her. I think multiculturalism, as lovely as it sounds, you know, welcoming lots of different cultures into our country and hopefully getting the best out of all of them for the benefit of the country as a whole, hasn't worked. And I think it hasn't worked because largely we've had too much immigration too fast, which she touched on yesterday. And then when the cultures come to our country, they tend to live in silos. We're not homogenising. And for a society to be to benefit from immigration, to benefit from different cultures, it's got to homogenise. There's got to be a sharing of values and a coming together. It's interesting
looking at the three of us around this table. Yeah. Isabel's descendants and relatives are from?
Well, mixture, but some from Belgium, some from the UK.
Me from Ireland. The Habibs came from where?
Well, my mother's from Isleworth, just west of Heathrow Airport. My dad's from Punjab. Yeah. So, you know, I'm probably the most sort of multicultural in a sense at this table. But
you're aware of then you conformed, or your father's family conformed to what was expected in London?
Yeah, well, I mean, my parents actually lived... It's very personal, but my parents, I'm very happy to talk about it. My parents lived in, I was born in Karachi. My mother moved to Karachi in 1961 as a white woman practicing architecture, which was very brave back in 1961. 2 months on a boat from London to Karachi. There weren't flights that she could afford in those days. And so I've had exposure to both cultures. And I mean, what was terrific, of course, I was digressing, but what was terrific about growing up in Karachi in 1965 through to 1979 when I left was it was the tail end of the post-colonial era, and it was a phenomenal time in the subcontinent. You know, it was a very peaceable time, with the exception of a couple of wars with India. It was actually quite a peaceable time, and we didn't have the kind of strife and civil difficulties that the country now has.
And we know the difficulties that come with the numbers and uncontrolled migration and whatever. I suppose we raise, most of us would raise an eyebrow at Suella Braverman. We're talking about our own histories and where we've all come from. But she seems very, very hard on someone whose family obviously did not originate in the UK.
Yeah, well, I think the point she's making is not that immigration is bad. She actually said immigration's a good thing, but it's the speed at which we've done it, and it's the extent to which we've done, which of course is not talking about refugees.
Yeah.
This is legal migration she was referring to. And I thought it was a brave speech because she talked about the political threat, the threat to democracy, the threat to the nation state. And I think nation states are being hollowed out. The Western liberal democracies, Europe, the United Kingdom and the United States are in many ways being hollowed out, not just by illegal migration, but by a kind of globalization that is going on with the priorities of nation states being subjugated to the priorities of what the G7 wants or what the G20 wants. And, you know, so we see ever-increasing power. I'm digressing, but I think it is important. We see ever-increasing power being vested in supranational institutions, the best example of which was the European Union, which we wanted to leave. And the EU is a super example because it actually states, it sets its stall out by saying, if you join us, you're pooling your sovereignty. And that diminishes the nation state. So right across the Schengen zone, you don't have borders. And borders, borders define a country. And if you give up your borders, you're giving up your statehood.
Can you see Schengen being reorganised or redrafted or reconstituted?
Well, I think if they had any sense, they would reinstitute borders across Europe now. Instantly, it would make the people smugglers' job much, much more difficult, because you wouldn't have this free movement. Literally, from the minute you get into of Italy, you can be up in Calais without being checked.
But it doesn't solve the problem, because then, you know, most of them would be stuck in places like Italy and Greece, and then there would still be huge questions about our role and how many we should take. I mean, we have to address the wider issues, surely, about why it's happening and all of that. But I want to get into some of the other comments that Suella Braverman was making yesterday about illegal migration and what she termed the kind of exploitation of the system. And she said that no longer was it, you know, satisfactory to claim that you were gay or female as justification for staying in the UK. What did you think about that? Because I did look up the figures, and according to Home Office statistics, only 1% of those who seek asylum in this UK, in this country, actually use that argument.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, one could argue that there was a bit of dog whistle politics going on. But, you know, we have, the other thing I think she was alluding to is that we have in this country, in many senses, been hijacked by the promotion, ostensible promotion of minority rights, which often now is to the detriment of the majority. You know, and the best example of that is diversity, equality and inclusion, where in the pursuit of levelling the playing field, actually what I think they've ended up doing is embedding forms of prejudice, both racial, sexual and so on. And I think she was highlighting that as a problem, that kind of discrimination has to stop. But of course, she's also right that discrimination in itself is not a high enough bar in order to justify emigrating. It's not a high enough bar to be a refugee. You know, you've got to be persecuted. Your life's got to be threatened. There's got to be some kind of state or institutional threat to you.
OK. Ben, absolutely fascinating talking to you and finding out about your history there.
Sorry about that. That was.
I wouldn't say sorry, but I thought that was fascinating. Very, very good. So listen, come back, talk to us again, because we've scratched the surface of this. It'll get people talking. People will have their views. Suella Braverman can say what she wants. The question is, who's listening to her? That is the question. Will it actually change anything? So let us know what you think about all that. For the moment, Ben Habib, thank you very much indeed.